Hey guys, welcome to Virtual Midweek. I am so disappointed that we can't be together tonight, but I hope that you guys will really engage with the content in this video and that you will be blessed and encouraged to live out your faith. Also, don't neglect to connect with your small groups. Your leaders will be reaching out to you, so be sure to do your check-ins. Especially the question, did you actually encourage your friends this week using song lyrics or your favorite praise songs or whatever kinds of lyrics or poetry you have available to you? Before we actually get into content, watch these couple of videos and we'll be back to you here in just a minute. So what would you rather? Would you rather have Wolverine's self-healing power, or would you rather have Flash's speed? Would you rather have Hulk's invincibility or Tony Stark's billions of dollars and tech brilliance? Which is more appealing to you? All right, so we're gonna switch this on its head a little bit and ask the question in a little bit of a different way. Let's say you're hungry and you are not sure where your next meal is gonna come from and you just might die. Who would you want to be there to save you? Which superhero? What about if you are in danger, like armies are gonna come kick your door down? Who would you want to be there to come to your rescue? Or how about if you are injured on the side of the road, who would you want to come and rescue you from that situation? Which superhero? Regardless of your answer to those questions, there are moments in life where we may be in mortal danger, where we may be actually hungry on the brink of death, or we may be in an accident and in need of that immediate help. Now, I've not actually experienced many moments in my life where I've been in mortal danger. There was one time when I was 16 or 17 years old, I forget exactly when it was, but my mom and dad left me at home with my dad's 65 Ford, I forget what kind of car it was, but it was an antique vehicle, and he was fixing it up. It was a small car with a big engine, and I took it out when I wasn't supposed to, and it was raining a little bit, and I was going too fast around a curve, and I rolled it into the ditch. It rolled over 2 times into the ditch, and I'll be honest with you, in the moment, whenever I realized what was happening, I was like, oh no, I am in mortal danger. But it was not necessarily because of what, as I was rolling and, how time slows down when in these moments. I was actually thinking more of, oh no, my parents are going to kill me. I am going to be in mortal danger because I am in so deep trouble. Because the car was totaled, it was never fixed, and so it was a bad situation all around. Fortunately, my parents reacted really well to that, but that was probably as close to mortal danger as I've ever been. So when I read stories in the scriptures and from ancient times about how people were hungry, I've never experienced this kind of hunger. When I read stories in the scriptures about people being on a boat, my experience with being on a boat in a storm is on a cruise ship. I've been on a couple of cruises, and when a storm comes, yeah, you feel it a little bit and you might get a little seasick, but it's not a mortal danger kind of thing. But when we read about people in a boat, we're talking about a boat that's barely bigger than my dining room table, it seems like. Probably quite a bit bigger than that, but these are not large boats, and so when they're talking about the boat being tossed by the waves, it's not this gentle or even super rocky kind of being pitched about in a cruise ship. We're talking about this might dump you out into the water kind of situation. And in the ancient times, if you get an infection, a broken bone, if you get, there were all kinds of famines and natural disasters that could spell your death at any moment. So we're not in a time of modern medicine. We're not in a time of the building structures that are super earthquake proof and all of that kind of thing. And so when we read about these things in the scriptures, we've got to keep this in mind, that this is a mortal danger kind of thing. This actually might lead to their death. And so when we read that they were afraid, it really could be the case that they were going to die. All right, so let's lead up. Let's remind ourselves of where we are in the story. In the story of Matthew, remember that we started with Jesus as Emmanuel, God with us. And so we traced Jesus' human genealogy through Joseph to Mary and the birth of Jesus. And then we see in the first several chapters that Jesus is a prophet like Moses. How he came out of Egypt, how he traveled through the waters, how he gave the law and reinterpreted the law. He's the Lord who had authority in all matters of the law. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that Jesus was Lord of the Sabbath. One of the most important rules that the Jews could follow was these Sabbath laws, and Jesus demonstrated his authority in this area as well. And last week, we talked about how Jesus taught in parables, teaching deep truths in terms that we can understand. And not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to get the word pictures and the metaphors and the similes. But as we come to understand these parables, we understand deeper things about the kingdom of God. Today, we come to a point. Jesus' cousin has just been put to death. I don't know if you've had family members who've died, but you need a moment, right? You need a moment to separate yourself. If your family member dies, if you're have experienced this kind of deep loss, and Jesus and John the Baptist were close. And John the Baptist wasn't just, he didn't just die. He was taken by force, imprisoned, and then his head was removed from his body because of a grudge that Herod's wife had against him. And so John the Baptist has just been beheaded, and Jesus hears about it. And this is what it says in John chapter 14, verse 13. It says, "When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place out in the wilderness to be alone." He wanted to get away. He wanted to be by himself. His cousin had just died by being beheaded by the king, and Jesus wanted to be alone. I think that's important for us, especially when we think of mental health issues that we deal with. The Son of God himself needed to grieve. He needed to mourn. He needed to allow his emotions time to work themselves out. So he went out by himself to be alone. But he didn't have much time. When the crowds heard that he was out by himself, they followed him on foot from the towns, and as he stepped to the shore, he saw a huge crowd. He felt compassion for them, and he began to heal their sick. All right, so Jesus, wanting to get away, finds himself in the middle of more ministry. He found himself confronted by more people who wanted something from him. But Jesus, God with us, was compassionate, and he healed them, even though what he really wanted to do was get by himself. When the evening came, the disciples approached him and said, "This place is a wilderness, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Now, I want you to notice something where they are. They're in the wilderness, and the people are hungry, and there's a multitude. We read in just a few verses that there are 5,000 of them, right? Does that make you think of anybody else? A crowd of Hebrews who were in the wilderness and hungry, and how they were fed by manna in the wilderness. They cried out to God. They were hungry in the wilderness, and Moses prayed for them, and manna and quail were provided for them in the wilderness. You see this connection between Jesus and Moses, and Jesus says, "They don't need to go away," Jesus told them. "You give them something to eat." So he passes it to the disciples, and the disciples are like, "We don't have any food. Where are you supposed to do this?" And Jesus is wanting them to experience the miracle, to be part of bringing the miracle about. But because of their lack of faith that they can actually do this, they're not able to. And Jesus says, "Bring them here to me," talking about the 5 loaves and 2 fish that they could find. Then he commanded the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate, and they were filled. Then they picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children. All right. So you follow the story here. Jesus, wanting to be by himself to mourn the passing of John the Baptist, finds himself confronted with a multitude of people. He heals as many as he has time to, and then they're hungry, and he feeds them using just a small amount of food, multiplies it to feed the multitudes. Now you see the parallels between Jesus and Moses in the wilderness. So he gets through with this, and immediately after they've gathered up the 12 baskets full of leftover food, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Remember, he's still mourning. He's still wanting to get away by himself to deal with his emotions, and he hasn't had the chance to do that yet. So again, he goes up on the mountain as soon as he's done with the multitudes, and he was there alone. So he sent the disciples across the sea by themselves with him up on the mountain, and he was there alone. But the boat was already over a mile from the land, battered by the waves because the wind was coming against them. There was a storm brewing on the Sea of Galilee, and the waves were against them. Around 3 a.m, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost!" they cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them, "Have courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Okay, so the disciples are in mortal danger. They're being tossed about by the waves. They're in danger of being overturned, capsized, and drowning in the middle of the sea. They were a mile off land, and they were in mortal danger. But Jesus comes out to them, walking on the water, and he says, "Don't be afraid." They're obviously afraid. And then their fear turns to something else because they see him walking on the water. What can walk on water? Obviously, it must be an apparition of some sort. It must be a ghost, and so they're even more afraid. But Peter, expressing a little bit of faith, says, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come on." And climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshipped Jesus and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." This is a great story, and I love how these two stories are back to back because in one story you have the feeding of the 5,000, and in another story you have Jesus saving the disciples from mortal danger as he walked out to them on the water, and then Peter walks on the water as well. I love these two stories being back to back, and I love talking about them in this way because in one story you have Jesus showing his incredible power, and in the next story you have the doubt of the disciples. Even though they have just, literally that day, they have seen Jesus do incredible things, they doubt that he can or that he will do those things for them. And so sometimes I think that Jesus is a little bit harsh on the disciples when he says, "Where's your faith? Why did you doubt? How in the world could this be what is concerning you when you have this person with you who has shown himself to be so powerful. Couple of points that I'd like to make sure that we get here. The disciples continuously saw Jesus do amazing things, yet they still doubted that Jesus would or that Jesus could do those things again or do those things for them. Okay, here's another point. Faith accomplishes way more than fear can. Now here's one of my favorite definitions of faith. Faith is believing that Jesus is who he said he is and that he will do what he said he will do. Faith is not just believing something, yes, believing in the person and promises of Jesus. Right? So Jesus is who he said he is, and he will do what he said he will do. And when we believe that, we can see some incredible things happen. See, faith accomplishes way more than fear can. When we're facing some incredible obstacles, when we're in mortal danger, when we're not exactly sure when our next meal is coming from, we know that Jesus is who he said he is, and he will do what he said he will do. He will take care of those people who are faithful to him. He will cause all things to come together for good for those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. He has promised those things to his people. When we act in faith, then we can see some incredible things happen because of that. The third thing, the same power that controls the natural and supernatural forces of this world dwells with us and empowers us to do amazing things. You see, it's not just that Jesus came to earth for a little while and did some amazing things and then went back to heaven and left us alone. No, he sent his abiding, indwelling presence, the Spirit of God, to dwell with us, to be with us, and to help us be together, to be God's representatives here on earth, and to be God's hands and feet to each other as well. And so the things that God can do in and through his people are often only limited by the scope of our imagination. I mean, I hear stories from missionaries especially about things, healings and amazing, miraculous things that happen because they have no doubt. They're like, of course this can happen, because they have faith. And I think that we're often shackled by the chains of our first world. We don't really need much. We're not really in mortal danger very often, so we don't see these kinds of miracles happen for us. So what can we do? What can we do with this information? How can we live out this kind of faith? Well, here's one thing that I'd like to encourage us to do, right? Sometimes it's hard to have faith when we're by ourselves. When we feel alone, when we are alone in our circumstances, sometimes it can be hard to trust that God really has our best in mind and that Jesus really is here with us. We know that it's true. We may understand the scriptures that say this is true, that Jesus is with us and that God is with us, but really our everyday feeling of the experience of that may be a little bit diminished if we're by ourselves. And us by ourselves, me by myself, I'm pretty easy to break if I'm isolated and away from other people. But when I am with other people, the Bible says a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken, right? So when I am with friends, when I am supported and encouraged by fellow believers who I can confess to and who can encourage me and who admonish me to do the right thing from time to time, that is when I find strength, and that is when my faith grows and where we can see some more incredible things happen. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 tells us to encourage one another, that God is in control. Our eternity is secure, and nothing can break us when we stand together. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Repeat to yourself 5 times. God is in control. My eternity is secure, and nothing can break us when we stand together. And then I want you to text that to one of the members of your small group and use those ideas to encourage each other today. All right, I love you guys, and I'm praying for you, and I can't wait to the time when we'll be able to be in the same room again together. We'll see you soon.